It's funny how the people who crush your spirit are the ones who end up craving it most. Or maybe it's not funny at all, maybe it's tragic. Like watching a car crash in slow motion and realizing you're the driver. That's exactly what it felt like the night Ryan walked into my cafe, looked me dead in the eyes, and told me I'd never be more than the guy who poured his morning latte. He said it casually, the way men like him always dose harp suits, sharper tongues, thinking they own the world. And maybe they do. But what he didn't know that night, what he couldn't possibly have imagined, is that those words wouldn't break me. They would ignite me. New York doesn't care about broken hearts or broken people. It swallows them, spits them out, and keeps moving. But I refused to be swallowed. I refused to stay behind the counter forever, polishing mugs while someone else's dreams filled the skyline. I had words in mysteries clawing their way out of my chest. And somehow, by some cruel twist of fate, Ryan became part of those stories, whether he liked it or not. The first time I really noticed him, wasn't when he insulted me. It was weeks before, when he came in every morning like clockwork 7:30, always in a rush, always barking into his phone. He had that Wall Street arrogance, the kind that made other customers step aside without complaint. Yet there was something about the way he lingered, just for a second, when I handed him his coffee. Something unguarded, a flicker of exhaustion or loneliness he tried to drown in caffeine and deadlines. But then came that night. He stayed late, long after most customers had gone. I was wiping down tables, trying not to yawn, when he closed his laptop, glanced up and said, "You know, you'll never get out of here. Guys like you. Baristas, waiters, dreamers. New York chews you up and leaves you nameless." I laughed, because what else was I supposed to do? Cry? Beg him to believe in me? No. I let him walk out, carrying his arrogance like armor. But I went home, and I wrote. God, I wrote like my life depended on it. And maybe it did. 2 years later, I wasn't nameless anymore. My books sat in the window of Barnes & Noble. My face occasionally popped up in literary magazines, and people who used to glance past me now whispered when I entered the room. Success felt strange, like wearing a coat too big for my shoulders. But it was real. And then came Ryan. Again. It was at a book signing in Soho. I was tired, smiling too hard for strangers who wanted selfies and autographs. And suddenly, there he was, standing at the back of the line, looking every bit as put together as before, but with something different in his eyes. Softer. Haunted, almost. When he reached me, he didn't even hold a copy of my book. He just leaned down, close enough for only me to hear, and whispered, "I was wrong about you." My hand trembled as I signed someone else's name, my heart slamming against my ribs. Because the truth was, I hadn't forgotten him. Not even a little. Falling in love with Ryan was the worst idea I'd ever had. And yet it was inevitable. He was everything I should have hated: rich, privileged, unapologetically blunt. But beneath the suits and sarcasm, there was a man who had lost pieces of himself along the way. I saw it in the way he drank too much, worked too late, and laughed too rarely. I saw it in the way his gaze lingered on me, as if searching for something he couldn't name. We weren't supposed to happen. Not in a city where two men holding hands could still turn heads. Not in a society that cheered for tolerance while sneering at intimacy. And especially not when our history was built on bitterness and words meant to wound. But desire doesn't care about rules. One night, after too many drinks and too much unspoken tension, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was angry, desperate, like he was punishing himself for wanting me. And maybe he was. But when his hands cupped my face, when his lips trembled against mine, I knew I was lost. Ryan tried to push me away. He said he didn't do relationships, especially not complicated ones. He said he wasn't brave enough to deal with the whispers, the headlines, the fallout. But late at night, when the city slept, he'd show up at my apartment. He'd stand in my doorway, soaked in rain or guilt, and I'd let him in. I always let him in. And every time I told myself it was the last. Every time I lied. Because no matter how much he hurt me, no matter how many times he said we couldn't work, I couldn't forget the way his arms felt around me. I couldn't forget the way he whispered my name like it was the only thing tethering him to the earth. And maybe, just maybe, I couldn't forget the way he once called me nameless. Because now, in his arms, I was anything but. Ryan's kiss haunted me long after that night. Clung to my skin, my lips, my thoughts. Every page I wrote afterward seemed to bleed with Ithis desperation. My surrender. The storm we both tried to deny. But there's a cruel thing about passion. It demands more. And Ryan was terrified of more. He kept retreating into his fortress of excuses. His job, his reputation, the invisible cage of expectations that chained him. Yet each time he tried to close the door on us, he came back. Like gravity, he was pulled to me against his better judgment. And me? I was no better. I told myself I wanted nothing from him, that I wouldn't let myself be destroyed by a man who couldn't even admit what he felt. But I was lying to him, to myself, to the entire city. Because every time his fingers found mine in the dark, every time his breath caught when I whispered his name, I believed. I believed he wanted me even if he couldn't say it aloud. The breaking point came one Sunday afternoon. I'd invited him to a small reading at a Brooklyn bookstore, a place where the smell of paper and coffee made me feel like I belonged. It wasn't a glamorous event, just a gathering of readers, a few local authors, and some curious passers-by. Ryan showed up late, his suit jacket draped over one arm, his tie undone. He stood in the back, watching as I read aloud a passage from my second book. The piece was raw, too raw maybe, about a man who wanted to love but didn't know how. About the other man who waited for him, hoping, hurting, hoping again. When the reading ended, people clapped, asked questions, bought copies for me to sign. Ryan lingered, silent. Then he disappeared before I could reach him. That night, I found him outside my building, sitting on the front steps like a boy who had lost his way. His hair was a mess, his eyes glassy. "You wrote about me," he said, his voice breaking. "No," I whispered. "I wrote about us." For the first time, he didn't deny it. He just buried his face in his hands, as if admitting it might tear him apart. We spiraled after that, closer, farther, closer again. Nights of fire, mornings of silence. He'd hold me like I was the only thing keeping him alive, then vanish into his world of skyscrapers and contracts. I grew tired of waiting, tired of being his secret, tired of feeling like my love was a crime. One night, after he slipped out of bed with his usual, "I can't stay," I snapped. I grabbed his wrist before he could reach the door. "Ryan, I'm done." His body froze. He didn't turn around. "You can't keep coming here," I said, my throat tight. "You can't keep taking pieces of me if you're not going to give me anything back." Finally, he looked at me, his face pale, his eyes desperate. "You don't understand. Then make me understand." He didn't. He just kissed me again. Like every kiss could be a replacement for words. But this time I didn't melt. Pulled away. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not of the world, not of love, but of losing me. Weeks passed with silence between us. I tried to focus on my career, on the endless interviews and deadlines. People praised me, wanted me, envied me. Yet every night, when the apartment went still, I missed him. One evening, I found a note slipped under my door. No signature, just his handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. "I don't know how to be the man you deserve, but I can't stop wanting to try." I crumpled it in my fist, then smoothed it out again. My heart ached, torn between anger and longing. The next time I saw him wasn't planned. I was at a gala downtown, publishers, editors, critics, all sipping champagne and pretending the city belonged to them. Ryan walked in with colleagues, his confidence polished to perfection. Our eyes met across the room, and everything I'd buried came rushing back. Later, when the crowd thinned and the music dulled, he found me on the terrace. The city glittered below us, oblivious. "I meant it," he said quietly. "The note." "Then prove it," I whispered. He reached for my hand. This time I didn't pull away. But proving it wasn't simple. The world doesn't forgive easily, especially when two men love each other in ways that challenge its comfort. Ryan's colleagues whispered. His family questioned. Even the tabloids caught on, twisting our truth into scandal. Ryan tried to shield me, but the storm was inevitable. I I received hate mail. Publishers hesitated. Old friends grew distant. One night, exhausted and raw, I asked him, "Is it worth it? Am I worth it?" His answer came without hesitation. "You're the only thing worth it." And for the first time, I believed him. Our love wasn't perfect. It was messy, painful, reckless. But it was real. And in a city that thrived on illusions, real was the most dangerous thing of all. There were nights when I cried in his arms, terrified we'd collapse under the weight of judgment. There were mornings when he made me coffee clumsy, too bitter, but full of intention that reminded me how far we'd come. Slowly, painfully, we learned to be more than a secret. We learned to walk into rooms together, not apart. We learned that love could be both fragile and fierce, and that sometimes the only way to survive was to stop hiding. Because no matter what the world said, no matter how loud its disapproval, we had found each other. And that was enough. The whispers grew into storms. At first, it was small side comments in the press, quiet chuckles at publishing parties, curious glances when Ryan and I dared to stand close enough that our shoulders brushed. But New York doesn't keep secrets for long, and neither does Wall Street. When a photo of us leaving my apartment together hit the internet, the fire spread fast. "Famous young novelist spotted with mystery man," one headline read. Another was crueler. "From barista to bedtime literary darling caught in scandalous affair." The mystery man, of course, wasn't so mysterious. Ryan's company prided itself on image, reputation, control. And in a world that still believed men like him should marry women with pearls and polite smiles, I was poison. He called me late one night, his voice ragged. "They know, Eli." I'd known it too, but hearing him say it made the air heavy. "Then stop hiding," I said, forcing the words past the knot in my throat. Silence. Then, "You don't understand what this will cost me." I wanted to scream that I did understand, that I'd lived my whole life knowing what love could cost. But instead I whispered, "And what about what it's costing us?" His breathing stuttered through the line, and then he hung up. Days passed. Ryan disappeared into boardrooms and press briefings, leaving me alone with manuscripts I couldn't finish. My editor begged for pages, but every time I opened my laptop, the words withered. What was the point of stories about love if my own was falling apart? The world saw me as successful, my second book climbing the charts, invitations piling up, but inside I felt hollow. I'd wanted fame, recognition, the chance to prove I was more than a nameless barista. I had all of it now, and still I wanted only him. Then came the gala. It was a charity event at the Met, glittering with chandeliers and champagne. I wasn't supposed to be the Remy publicist insisted, saying it would remind people of your talent, not your personal life. But the second I walked in, I saw Ryan. He looked like the man I had first met. Tailored suit, sharp jawline, eyes like steel. But there was something else too, a weariness, a fracture in the armor. He stood surrounded by investors, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, pretending nothing was wrong. Our eyes locked across the room. For a moment, the noise faded, the glitter dulled, and it was just us two men bound by everything unspoken. I should have looked away. I should have protected myself. Instead, I walked straight toward him. "Ryan," I said softly when I reached him. His mask cracked just a little, but the men around him noticed. One of them smirked, whispering something into his ear. Ryan stiffened, his jaw tight, and then denied me. "I don't know this man," he said coldly, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words sliced through me like glass. My chest burned, but I didn't let them see me bleed. I turned and walked out of the Met, the sound of his voice echoing in my head until it was all I could hear. That night, I swore I was done. No more late-night visits, no more secret touches, no more waiting for him to choose me. If Ryan wanted to protect his world of glass towers and empty smiles, he could. But I wouldn't shatter for him anymore. I poured every ounce of rage and heartbreak into my writing. The new manuscript became darker, rawer than anything I had done before. It wasn't about Ryan, not directly, but it carried his shadow. A story of betrayal, silence, and a love too fragile to survive the weight of lies. My editor said it was my best work yet. I didn't tell him it was killing me to write it. Weeks passed. I avoided the cafes Ryan used to haunt, the streets we used to walk together. New York was big enough to lose someone in if you wanted to, or so I thought. One night, I stepped out of a bookstore after a small reading, and there he was, standing in the rain like something out of the very novels he used to mock. His suit was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes burning with something I didn't dare name. "Eli," he said, voice raw. I turned to leave, but his hand caught my arm. "Please," he begged. "Don't walk away." I wrenched free, anger flaring. "You already did that for me. At the Met, in front of everyone." His face twisted with shame. "I know. I was a coward. I've been a coward my whole life. But not anymore." "Why should I believe you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because I'm done hiding," he said. "From them, from myself. From you." The next day, the world exploded again, but this time it was Ryan who lit the match. He called a press conference, standing at the podium where he had once spoken about mergers and profits. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded. And then, in front of the entire city, he said the words I thought I'd never hear. "My name is Ryan Caldwell," he began. "I'm an executive, a son, a brother. And I'm also in love with a man. His name is Eli Matthews. He is a writer, and he is the best thing that has ever happened to me." Gasps filled the room. Reporters shouted questions, chaos erupting. But all I heard was my name, spoken without shame. I watched it unfold on a television in my apartment, tears streaming down my face. For the first time, Ryan had chosen Menet in the shadows, not in whispers, but in the full, unforgiving light of the world. That night he came to me again. Not soaked in guilt this time, but steady, resolute. "I don't care what it costs anymore," he said. "I don't care if I lose everything. The only thing I can't lose is you." I stared at him, my chest aching with both fury and hope. "And if it destroys us?" He stepped closer, his hand finding mine. "Then at least we'll be destroyed together. But I think we'll survive. Because I've never wanted anything as much as I want this. As much as I want you." I let the silence stretch, let him feel the weight of what he was asking. Then finally, I whispered, "Then don't ever make me nameless again." His lips trembled into a smile, and when he kissed me, it was different. No longer desperate or angry, but certain. Whole. The city didn't change overnight. The whispers didn't vanish, the judgments didn't stop. But something inside us shifted. For the first time, we weren't pretending. We weren't running. We were simply together. And maybe that was enough. The city did not forgive us overnight. Ryan's declaration echoed across newspapers, social media, and television. Some applauded his courage. Others condemned it. Investors pulled out of his company. My inbox flooded with both love letters and hate mail. But through it all, something had changed. No longer flinched when our hands brushed in public, and I no longer wondered if I mattered to him. We had stepped into the light, and though it burned, it also warmed. Still, the cost was real. Ryan lost his seat on the board. The company that once praised his ruthlessness now called him a liability. His family's Sunday dinners turned cold. His father's disappointment louder than any words. And may lost readers who claimed my books were no longer about universal love, but politics. As if love between two men couldn't be as universal as any other. But on quiet nights, when we lay side by side in the small apartment that used to feel too lonely for me, he would whisper, "I don't regret it," and I believed him. Months passed, and New York kept moving, indifferent to our small revolution. But our lives began to stitch themselves into something new. Ryan found work as a consultant, trading skyscrapers for smaller firms where his name still carried weight. He came home earlier now, often smelling of rain instead of late-night whiskey. Sometimes he'd beat me to the kitchen, fumbling with the coffee maker, insisting he wanted to learn how to brew it the way I once did for him. His attempts were terrible, burnt, watery, sometimes both, but I drank every cup. Because it wasn't about the coffee. It was about the man who once told me I would stay nameless. now learning to say my name like a prayer. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at Columbia University. A lecture hall filled with aspiring writers stared at me as though I had the answers to everything. I talked about persistence, rejection, and the fire that comes from being told you're nothing. When the Q&A began, a student asked, "How do you write love stories that feel so real?" I hesitated, glancing toward the back of the hall. Ryan stood there, leaning against the wall, his tie loose, his smile soft. "Because," I said, my voice steady, "I live one." The students clapped, but my gaze stayed on him. And for once, he didn't look away. The final test came quietly, not with scandal or headlines, but with my third book. It was my most personal, yet a story of two men who found love despite the world telling them not to. My publisher hesitated, warning me it might alienate a mainstream audience. "Then let it," I said. "I won't write lies." The book launched on a rainy November day. At the signing, the line snaked out the door, people of every age clutching copies. Some whispered, "Thank you." Some cried. Some held their partner's hand a little tighter. Near the end of the night, Ryan approached the table. He didn't cut the linens, he waited, patient, a copy of my book in his hands. When he reached me, I asked, "Who should I make it out to?" "To us," he said simply. My pen shook as I wrote those words. To us. We moved in together not long after. Our apartment was too small for his suits and my stacks of books, but somehow it fit us. He learned to love my clutter, and I learned to tolerate his obsession with order. On weekends, we'd walk through Central Park, unafraid of who might see. Sometimes people stared, sometimes they smiled. We stopped caring which. There were fights, of course. Nights when his fear crept back, or my temper flared. But each time we chose each other again. That was the difference. That was the miracle. One evening, as snow dusted the city, we sat by the window with mugs of cocoa, his attempt again. Slightly less terrible this time. He reached for my hand, his thumb tracing circles against my skin. "Do you ever think about the beginning?" he asked. I laughed softly. "You mean when you told me I'd never be more than a barista?" His wince was genuine, and I kissed the regret off his lips. "I was wrong," he murmured. "Yes, you were," I teased. Then quieter. "But if you hadn't said it, I might never have written that first story. I might never have become who I am. And I might never have found the courage to become who I am," he replied. We sat in silence, the city glowing around us, our breaths fogging the glass. For the first time, the past felt less like a wound and more like the soil that had let us grow. Love didn't fix everything. It didn't silence every critic or mend every fracture with his family. But it gave us something stronger than approval: resilience. It gave us the courage to live honestly, to wake each day and choose each other. And maybe that was the point. Not fairy tales, not perfect endings. Just two men, flawed and stubborn, refusing to let the world define their worth. Years later, at another signing, a young man approached me with trembling hands. "I'm scared," he confessed, "of being who I am, of loving who I love." I closed his book gently, meeting his eyes. I was too, but you'll find someone who makes the fear worth it. Someone who reminds you you're not nameless. Behind him, Ryan waited, smiling the same way he had that first night I read aloud in Brooklyn. When the boy left, Ryan leaned down, brushing his lips against my ear. "You really love that word, don't you? Nameless. It's where we started," I said, "and where we'll never be again." He kissed me then, not caring about cameras, not caring about the world. And I realized that this messy, imperfect, beautiful life was the story I had been writing all along. Not for the critics, not for the fame, for us. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.